Hello, everybody, and welcome to the PC Gamer Show for July 18th, 2018. Well, there's Evan. I was wondering where Evan went. My name is James Davenport. I'm an associate editor at PC Gamer, and joining me today we have Tim Clark, who is now, he has ascended to, what's your official title here?
I'm editorial director now.
Ooh.
It may not even be my final form, James.
Oh my God, that's horrifying to think about. Also with us, also ascended, Evan Lottie, global editor-in-chief of PC Gamer. How you doing, Evan?
Oh boy, I'm glad to fulfill my dream of becoming Tim.
So, yeah. It's funny how common that dream is.
I'm sure.
Yeah, how you guys doing? Been playing games, enjoying the sphere of personal computer gaming. I'm assuming, Evan, you're still doing the Siege thing, yeah?
Yeah, a lot of Rainbow Six Siege. I've been playing Deep Rock Galactic as well. We can talk about in a little bit here, but it's been like a fun, interesting time for games right now. We got the No Man's Sky Next update coming out next Tuesday. You know, a lot of us were talking about this morning whether that's going to be sort of a redemption moment for that game or actually more of the same. You know, unsure what to expect. Like a very exciting trailer. We've seen that before for No Man's Sky, and yeah, just a bunch of interesting news over the past couple of weeks we'll be talking about today, like the Siege ban system that rolled out. There's also another Rainbow Six Siege patch today, so looking forward to digging into it with you guys.
Yeah, we'll also be talking about, well, there was some news about the Culling 2 this morning. Unfortunate news that might have a happy ending. We'll see. We'll also be talking about, this last weekend I watched Epic's first go at their official season of competition for Fortnite, and it was a disaster. So look forward to more talk about that. But first, let's talk about what we've been playing and maybe what we're looking forward to, because Tim, you're still hitting the regulars, yeah?
Tim, you're still playing those same games. Correct, James. Correctly deduced. It's an exciting time in the life of the two games I spend most of my time playing. Which are, of course, Destiny 2 and Hearthstone. Destiny 2 had yesterday, which was Tuesday, update 1.2.3 arrived, which is the patch kind of that's arriving before the next expansion, which is due September, called Forsaken. This patch tweaked a lot of quality of life stuff. They buffed a bunch of exotic armor. I was trying out on my lunch break before this. One of the armor pieces they revitalized, which are called the Doomfang Pauldrons, which I'm sure everyone will enjoy as a name, which are two enormous purple shoulder pads with kind of big alien tusks coming off them, and they were like garbage tier. Really, they weren't garbage tier actually. They were kind of just not really meta, not really used. And they buffed them so that now when you become your Void Captain America and you're throwing your shield around, you can juice up your super energy and really extend your super in the same way as you can using some of the other exotics in the game, like Raiden Flux on Arcstrider. And like, I was watching a GIF this morning where like it showed that you could stay in your super for like 40 seconds, which is a lot. And I was trying that out at lunch and really kind of clearing whole rooms. So it was a lot of fun, and it's kind of one of those things. We talk a lot about games as service, games which are run as a service, and the kind of like incremental changes and tweaks that developers can make to refresh them. And it's funny to me with a looter shooter like that, how just making I wouldn't say like insignificant changes, but changes to like a small subsection of items can really like switch up the way you play. You want to dig out loadouts that you wouldn't have touched before and try play styles you might not have gone for. So I'm enjoying that a lot, and that kind of was also set the ground for the Solstice of Heroes event, which begins next week. There's a bunch of new armor coming in, new shit to collect as ever, and also running Faction Rally this week in that game. So I'm just grinding lost sectors, and I'm having a great old time, honestly. Like, I know I'm like kind of the Stockholm Syndrome fan of that game. He's been held by the kidnappers for too long and has now fallen in love with them. But I honestly think, and feel free to completely ignore my opinion on this game as I'm an unreliable witness, but I think come September with that expansion, it's actually going to be in a pretty good place on PC. Speaking of which, Clan Chat, they long overdue Clan Chat came in,
yes,
just to the PC build yesterday. A couple of my friends in the PC Gamer clan who still are active were messaging me, so that was fun. And then, do you want me to still talk about Hearthstone, James? I already feel like I've burnt a lot of my time.
No. Hey, go for it. Cards, man.
There's cards, right?
Yeah, so the Boomsday Project is the next expansion for that. It's coming out September 6th. It's themed around Dr. Boom, one of the most infamous cards in Hearthstone. He was a very minor figure in World of Warcraft. I think he was just like a kind of a quest giver in Netherstorm, but became, like I say, this kind of one of the most infamously powerful cards in Hearthstone. They used to call him Dr. 7 because he was so good. You just played him on turn 7 and you won. And the theme of the expansion is kind of his wacky experiments in science. They brought back a lot of kind of, or they're bringing back the mech tribe, the robot tribe, with a lot of kind of synergies. They have these new keywords. One is called magnetic, and the way that works is you have a robot with an ability or a mech with an ability. You put it to the left of another robot, and they merge, so that the combined robot, immediately gets the effects of the other robot, which can make for some very kind of big tempo plays. They've also got this new mechanic called Omega. Omega cards work by, if you play them on 10 mana, they get like a bonus effect. So the example is there's like a 2/6 taunt guy who costs 4, so he's pretty boring basically. He's not a mech. He's not a mech. There's some controversy about that because he looks very much like a robot. But if you play him on 10, he gets like +10 attack. So like 10 is a lot. And the idea of these cards, well, I mean, they've only shown one so far, is that they kind of have this versatility where they can act just as like a kind of a regular dude early in the game, but if you hang on to them or you happen to draw them late, they're still relevant and they can be a big bomb in your deck. And, you theoretically can make some more interesting deck building choices that way. And the other big kind of thing they're adding is legendary spells, which are like, obviously, well, not obviously, we don't play Hearthstone, but you can only run one of these per deck. Sorry, you can only run one of these in your deck, and the example they've shown so far is a one called, I think, Myra's Unstable Element, where you play it, I think it costs 5, and you draw your entire deck. So you burn, obviously, most of the cards, but maybe that doesn't matter if you're just trying to win in the next couple of turns anyway. So they're kind of into reveal season now, spoiling kind of new cards, spoiling in the sense of showing you them each day. And on PC Gamer tomorrow, which is Thursday, around about noon Pacific time, we're going to have 3 cards to reveal. I've seen them. They're cool. They're good enough, I think, to see play. If you're a Druid guy, you're definitely going to want to check them out. So, yeah, that should be about noon Pacific. If you're listening after that, then, well, you won't have been there for the big reveal, but it'll still be on the website.
Well, I'm glad you're still finding life in these 2 games. I mean,
you're going to ask me if I've played anything else, and the answer is I played about 5 levels of Overcooked 2 11.
Okay,
that was good.
Okay, that's something.
Good fun. We made some burgers, some sushi.
Yeah.
What about you?
I felt like I was having like some sort of test to see if I've got like early onset dementia, because we used to play quite a bit of that in the office, and immediately, as soon as like we were on like a frigging hot air balloon that was on fire for not even a discernible reason, it just was on fire, and then it crashed through the roof of the sushi restaurant, and for a moment I froze, like like in like the old Vietnam movies, like when the flare goes up and suddenly you're surrounded, and like I was just the guy just standing there shaking with the gun. Like Evan and Bo were like running around immediately chopping fish and wrapping, rice balls up. And I just sort of stood there looking at the chaos around me, just wanting to cry.
Like sitting in the flaming crater, and I'm like reaching out with my hand. Tim, get out! We've got to go.
Well, they've also added a throw mechanic, so you can like toss burger buns around and stuff.
Yeah, that was like
is the game changer.
I mean, that was in the first game, but it was not intended.
Okay.
It wasn't an intended thing, and they added it now, and you can like bonk people with the objects you throw now. So that it's an interesting new thing to add that will inevitably make things way more complex.
Yeah,
I would genuinely like to watch Overcooked as an esport.
Can you fucking imagine?
The APM is real. The APM is real.
Get some Germans and Koreans in there, just destroying it.
God,
NA would be terrible at Overcooked. They're too busy focusing on the sandwiches. I'd just be fascinated by.
Never even heard of this sushi. Oh my gosh. Well, Thanks for telling us about the same games again, Tim.
James, what have you been playing?
I'm about to tell you about the same game again.
Singular. The game's singular.
I know. Man becomes the monster in my now playing. I've been playing more Fortnite, and yeah, it's season 5 is it's treating me well. I think. I talked about all the changes last week, but I'm becoming more familiar with them. They've added things like, besides the new desert biome, there's this like Viking village on top of a mountain, all these cool little touches around the map. I think what I'm becoming more fascinated with are these rifts, and these rifts are all around the map. They're basically like old Quake like teleporters, except the Fortnite spin on that, where you hop into a rift and it'll just teleport you into the sky directly above where you were. And what this does is it allows, a lot of interesting like strategies from the start and tactical like in the moment opportunities. Like a common building in Fortnite are these 1x1s, these big just towers is what we call them 1x1s, because they're just, you continually build them into the air. They don't really have any buttresses or support systems, and people will camp in them and hide in them and yada yada. And now those are, if you happen to build one over a rift, so when people shoot out the bottom of your tower and you go falling to the ground, you will instead fall into a rift and have a way out and just like be able to get out of there. So that's just one interesting use. The other interesting uses are just like, I'm curious to see in these, which we'll talk about more later on, in competitive Fortnite, or at least like these UMG sort of unofficial tournaments. It's interesting to see players like use these things to get around the map and decide where to go. But yeah, it's just a much more mobile game. You don't have to worry about, I think a big problem with season 4 and season 3, and as soon as they added Tilted Towers, this big city area, it was really hard to distribute the player population evenly. And by adding like golf carts, these rifts, shopping carts, and all these other like mobile like systems that are designed to get you moving and playing at like sort of the edge of the storm, there's much more incentive to just drop anywhere, because you can get across the map easier, and you can make quicker rotations, more interesting kind of routes through the map as the storm evolves. It's been a lot of fun for that alone.
Are the golf carts a permanent fixture or just for this season?
It's really hard to say. Like they don't really comment on what is staying and what is not. I would imagine those are sticking around because I think they are good and helpful. And I can't imagine like what taking them away would feel like a handicap. It would feel difficult to go back to walking everywhere. But they've taken away, like last season they introduced these gravity rocks that you could consume and just like become floaty for, I don't know, a good 15 seconds, and those are gone now, and there's no word if they're coming back. They've vaulted so many things, but I think that's sort of the interesting why I like the game so much. Is just like, what's this week's like menu going to be in terms of tools, and that's always, I don't know, it always gets me to play at least, I don't know, a couple hours a week, and I had never played multiplayer games like this consistently before, so it's working.
It's almost like extending the notion of Overwatch's arcade mode, which is where the game sort of reserves novelty modes, and like, okay, what if you can't pick your own hero and you're sort of randomly selected as a character, or what if we have like these seasonal like snowball fight things as part of our winter update. It's almost the notion of like taking that philosophy and making it the main game, just constantly keeping people on their toes, kitchen sink approach to mechanics and props and stuff like that, and just seeing what sticks, based on the feedback, based on what the developers like.
Yeah, it's always interesting at the very least, and if it's broken, they're pretty good at fixing it or taking things out quickly enough.
It's going to be fascinating to me to see like how popular, we talked about this before, but how popular these constant injections of kind of additional content and tweaks to the familiar ways people are playing is going to be adopted by other games, because you can bet they're all looking at this now going, we need to be doing this, and like, what can we do with our with our kind of equivalent live game to switch stuff up at a faster pace, because I can't think of another game which moved this quickly in terms of constantly refreshing. Like you're normally looking at months between substantial changes. Like
yeah, and it's, I think even further, it's like, how is it going to change the relationship between like the baseline relationship between players and developers? And we're going to talk about, I think, about more of that when the Culling 2 comes up, because like how much influence and how much credit should or how much should players expect of developers based on what they want, or what the perceived want in a community is. To enter Haggis in the chat, poof, Fortnite, get your manhood back, LOL. 1v1 me, bro. 1v1 me. 1v1 me. Anyway, enough Fortnite. Evan, what have you been playing?
Yeah, I've been spending a lot of time with a game that I saw at PAX at some point last year, Deep Rock Galactic. So this is from Coffee Stain. You may recall as creators of Goat Simulator and stuff like that. But this is like a procedural, almost Left 4 Dead style 4-player co-op with classes. Mission-based game. You're going into these alien caves on an alien planet. You're playing as dwarves to explore these procedurally generated caves and caverns to either like get valuable minerals, or destroy a certain type of alien, or to recover some buried alien eggs and kind of return them to this modular kind of deposit station that follows you around. And you're in the same style of Left 4 Dead and similar co-op games. You're like going in and you're getting back to the chopper basically with as many people as you can. And I've just really been enjoying it. I think I've played a lot of cooperative shooters, stuff like Vermintide, which Vermintide, like I love for a minute. Like I really appreciate the style game it is. I love what Factshark has done with that license. I think it's one of the best, or if not the best, Warhammer game, if other than like Dawn of War 2. But it's a game entirely focused on shooting and hacking enemies, and for me that's just like, it's like physically exhausting to some extent. You're just it's like your lizard brain just constantly going like, okay, wave, destroy, reset, heal. It's so patterned. Even if the level design's nice, the art is nice. With Deep Rock Galactic, what I love about it is there are these long stretches where you're just hitting your pickaxe up against the wall to gather gold, or gather nitro, which is like a separate resource that allows you to call in supply drops. Or you're throwing one of my favorite mechanics in the game. So the game has such a wonderful treatment of lighting, because it's very voxely, right? It's like everything's destructible. You can bash anything in the world to create holes and dig tunnels and stuff like that. But on most maps, there are like different styles of maps. Part of the struggle and the focus is finding your way to like sort of the next cave section almost. And you're looking for a certain type of dirt, compacted dirt that leads you into that. It's like a signal to like dig here and go through, and you'll almost break through a door basically. But as you're doing that, like you're underground, there's not a lot of light. But there are some like natural minerals and kind of alien plant life that emit some light. But every character has like a recharging set of flares that they throw, and kind of how you spend those flares to help yourself and your teammates like legitimately leads to like discovering minerals and stuff like that. And so you have to be very careful about like where you throw them, how you throw them, and they bounce as physical objects in the environment. They're very light. So you watch them like tumble down hills, you watch them like fall down mine shafts and stuff like that, and you're sort of looking for the glimmer of minerals as they do that. So the way that it makes something like that's very simple in other games, like which is a flashlight, into a really interesting mechanic. I've really been enjoying navigating. The environment is treacherous. I think the most common way that you die in that game is falling.
Yeah. Because
you lose your footing, or you grapple the wrong thing with your grappling gun, or you can't see in the dark, right? So I've just so been enjoying the exploration aspect of that game. And yes, there's a bunch of combat and waves of enemies attack you. To me, that's not the most interesting aspect of it. It's one of the best co-op games on PC for me. I also think the sound design is excellent, including the soundtrack.
I agree. Yeah, I played a good chunk of this with the developers when it was, like just before I went to early access. I played a bunch with our one of our Discord mods, Jules. Shout out Jules. And a couple weeks, maybe a month or two back, and it's a really good time. I think what the comments you had on the lighting and the exploration, like with a Left 4 Dead or Vermintide, you always know like generally where you're gonna go, but there are these moments when Deep Rock opens up. You'll like you said, you'll find that soft dirt, and you'll chip through, and you'll be in this tight tunnel, and you'll chip through, and then boom, there'll be this wide open cavern that you can't even get the full scope of from tossing your glow sticks, and you'll see generally where you need to go, and it'll be like all the way up in the top corner, or like just stories and stories down this chasm. And like it really sells the fantasy, I think, because it's around the same time, or the horror of the movie The Descent, just being totally disoriented and enveloped in darkness, but for like the tools you have. And I don't know, it seemed at the time that they were really they were updating it fairly frequently. Are they, I don't know, have they added any tools or things that stand out to you?
You know, my time over the past week is kind of only
Gotcha.
the time that I've spent with it, so I haven't seen that progression. But yeah, as you say, there are moments where I was playing with a DJ Noob, a PC Gamer Club member, this week, and he hadn't played for a while, but he had played, dozens of hours previously. So he was sort of getting that exposure you're talking about. And we had stepped into a cave together, and we were just both sort of awestruck of like how big and complex it was, because we were both like, we've never seen something this intricate before. It's almost like we have to develop a plan, because we were playing with 2 players instead of 4. Like, how are we going to tackle this and like work through it so we don't get lost or we don't sort of get separated. I love that feeling of disorientation. Like you say, as you play, Left 4 Dead 2-3 times, that's just immediately gone, right? So anyway, I think this is really a worthwhile game for folks who like that style of game or looking for co-op that isn't just shooting.
Is it still in early access now?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but there's a good amount. It's had about a year, I think, or so to mature. There's a decent variety of mission types. Actually, some of the mission types don't require sort of point A to point B exploration. You're sort of you have like a miniature base almost that you're just sort of making little incursions from and coming back to. So there's like good little differences there in the style. Otherwise, I'll just rattle off. I started playing Celeste yesterday, just for like an hour or so. So I'm looking forward to spending more time with that. Like one of the most celebrated platformers of the past year or two. And Rainbow Six Siege, which we'll be talking about, remains a fixture for sure.
Cool.
And I actually got a patch today, so that's cool. They're nerfing and buffing some operators, but it was funny because Finka, who's one of the most, not the most recent, but one of the most recent operators added, she's sort of this almost medic-like support character who can provide like a instantaneous heal or overheal, depending on your health, to the whole team. That lasts for about 20 seconds. She was in this funny situation where she had an extremely high win rate, so people who picked her tended to win more frequently than other operators, but she was also underplayed relative to other operators. So Ubisoft in the patch notes today was like, well, we want her to be more popular because she's good, but we also need to make her weaker because she's like good. So it's just weird, like we often think about this balance.
Yeah. Like
balance is an issue of like, oh, this is too strong, make it weaker. This is too weak, make it strong. But it's much more complex than that often. We have a news story on the site kind of digging through this and showing Ubisoft's pick rates versus win rates for these operators. So encourage you to look at that.
I've talked to the Hearthstone guys like almost every time I interview them. I'm usually obsessed with talking about like nerfs and balance stuff, and they've spoken regularly about how like it's not always about kind of raw power level. Oftentimes, like what the emotional response to like losing to a particular thing can be. Like something can be even have like a negative win rate, like a below 50% win rate, but be so obnoxious the experience of when it does win that you have to change it because the players just end up hating it. Likewise, people can think like flashy things are much better than they actually are because they're flashy, because they do something cool. What happened to the text message lady? I was fascinated by that operator. Is she still in the meta?
Oh, Dokkaebi. Yes. So Dokkaebi is a Korean operator on attack who she basically hacks the other team's devices. So at 2 points during the match, she can trigger a phone call on everybody's phones, and you just hear this ambient buzzing, which helps you sort of echolocate the enemy team. So yeah, she's still in there. We updated our list of the best and worst operators in Siege. We don't consider her to be a top character, but she's like a helpful supporter. She has sort of a decent sniper rifle. But I don't know, like what operators are useful in Siege, and this is an aspect of the game that I like. I think it varies a lot based on your skill level. You know, there are certain tricks that are like very obvious and easy to avoid for experienced players that are actually like very entertaining and more effective at lower skill levels. And I like that the game operates that way.
Cool. Well, let's keep talking about Siege, but let's back off. Let's zoom out from the operators and talk about, I guess, the culture of the player base, and what Ubisoft is doing to address the typically toxic culture that comes kind of part and parcel with the internet in general, and invades our games whether we like it or not. Ubisoft has a new sort of instaban policy for Rainbow Six Siege. Evan, can you talk about this? Because you broke the story, I think, last week.
Yeah, this got a lot of attention late last week. So basically, Ubisoft had published a blog post earlier this year about toxicity, and it hadn't really revealed its exact plans. They've also talked about cheating and some other issues. So it was a bit of a surprise when this rolled out. Essentially what we saw were players were reporting they were being banned, or they were seeing other people being banned, and it seemed like it was because those players were receiving like, you've been banned because of toxicity. They're being banned because of things that they've typed into the text chat, either globally or to their team. And so we did a little bit of digging, and yeah, it turned out that these players were being banned. And they were temporary bans. You could access no aspect of Siege while they're in place. But on the first occurrence, they were 27 minutes in length. And then for repeat offenders, it turned out they were 2 hours. And then there's sort of if you continue to offend, I guess there's sort of like an official investigation launched by the system or Ubisoft that could lead to a permanent ban. We don't have as much data or information on how that works or how that's handled, but that's the basis of the system. And as we understand it, stuff like the N-word or homophobic slurs, for example, are among the stuff that triggers the system. And yeah, there was a mixture of, I don't know, I always struggle with how to represent this stuff because comments can be deceiving in sort of what the reaction is with vocal minorities and whatnot. But certainly we saw a lot of praise, particularly on our tweets regarding this story. I saw tons of game developers stepping up and other kind of figures in the industry stepping up to share the story enthusiastically. Folks like Jake Solomon on the XCOM team and a lot of other developers just saying like, good, great to see this. This is long overdue. This should be a standard, so on and so forth. But there was sort of a thread or two of criticism there, or players feeling like they were quote unquote censored, or that their speech was being impinged upon in a multiplayer game, which we can dig into. Yeah, that's effectively how it operates. As I understand, Overwatch has a similar system in place. I think Overwatch may actually like mute certain words. I mean, a story more than a year ago was that if you type GGEZ, as is often sort of a
yeah.
a terrible like low class way to end a match, into Overwatch, it would change your text automatically into one of like several self-deprecating statements about how you want your mother and things like that. So Blizzard poking fun of players there. So it's certainly not the first time we've seen this kind of system, but for a game as established as Siege, it's up there with Counter-Strike, though beneath it in popularity. One of the most popular multiplayer games on PC, to adopt this kind of system that instantly, automatically bans players temporarily for using racial slurs and similar language. I think it's a great step in the right direction.
But Evan, and I'm playing devil's advocate here, what about freedom of speech?
Let me tell you how freedom of speech doesn't. If you go into a restaurant and eat a meal, it doesn't mean you start getting to call. You haven't got permission then to call the other patrons all manner of like racial or sexual slurs. Like all sorts of public places have codes of conduct run by the people and administered by the people who have set up those places. Right? You use them at the grace of the people who set them up. Freedom of speech is something that's related to being able to speak back to the government and stuff. It's nothing to do with behaving with decorum in kind of organized meeting spaces.
And it's also not consistent across the world. Think about the fact. So hate speech operates very differently, and it's actually much more restricted in countries like France, where Ubisoft is headquartered,
Germany,
than it is in the United States, Germany as well, Australia. So you got to think that there's not one world standard for this kind of thing. We have to remind ourselves of that. But ultimately, I was I'm not going to say I enjoyed arguing with folks about this issue on Twitter, but I did spend some time trying to engage with these folks and get a sense of where their thoughts were exactly. And what I saw was some amount of conflation between, I think, like hates. One of the arguments I saw, for example, was, why is Ubisoft concerned with banning players for saying a bad word in a mature game, 18+ game with like violence and killing? It's all about shooting, right? And to me, that's like, it's like saying, well, hate speech is just like mature content. It's not. It's like not acceptable. It's unacceptable behavior, and hopefully in 2018 we should as a gaming community and as a society be able to say, this is not okay. And that's what Ubisoft's doing. It's saying it's not okay. A lot of other folks are sort of exaggerating. Some of the comments I saw, which is just typically the case on Twitter, I don't think they had taken the time to really dig into the story, and they were concerned that like, oh, Ubisoft is going to take away my purchase because I said a bad word or something. It's a very temporary slap on the wrist, honestly.
But again, to use like a tenuous analogy, much like I'm trying to think of a contemporary violent film now. I'm going to show my age. Like, if you go and see like Commando starring Arnold Schwarzenegger, it doesn't give you the right to turn around to the person sitting next to you over his or her popcorn and call them a bad word. Like, conflation's the right way. Like, those are two separate parts of the activity.
Yeah, I mean, it's like Adult Swim night is not a fucking lawless, terrible time to be in the pool. You can't piss in the pool. You can't shit in the pool. You have to.
I mean, the exception would be, I'd say, like if you were a server, and you're all acting out kind of, like Boys in the Hood or something. But even then, it feels like super messy. Yeah. So yeah, I'm surprised there isn't more of this already, and it sounds like, given the response, there probably will be quite soon.
Should probably spend less time addressing the, in my opinion, dumb responses to this. But one of the other ones that I saw along these lines with some frequency was, this is a slippery slope. Like, oh, first they're gonna, as if like, being able to say the N-word in multiplayer games is like really important to me. Like, that freedom must be protected. But like the idea that like, oh, first it's these words, but then like, in a year or so it's going to be, if you say this other political thing, or you say this, if you're just being mean, if you're just trash talking, that's going to be forbidden. Then what? Well, first of all, the idea that because a system may in the future encounter like some issues, or like we may have to think through the difficult line between hate speech and trash talk, doesn't mean we should do nothing. You know what I mean? Like, this is such a Silicon Valley way of thinking. Twitter's been criticized broadly, Facebook's been criticized broadly, Steam's been criticized broadly.
I was gonna say that,
for how it handles like hate groups and the sort of the existence of this kind of speech on their platforms. And unfortunately, what we see a lot in Reddit recently as well from these companies, like directly from their CEOs often, is like, well, gosh, it's like really hard to build an automated system that handles this with like total perfection. So I'm going to do nothing, or basically nothing.
Yeah, rather than like as if being kind of accused of like getting someone being a hypocrite is like somehow like a greater crime.
And likewise, I saw a lot of folks saying, well, people are just going to spell it differently and like circumvent the system. Again, it's like, just because, you know, an automated system that addresses an issue isn't perfect doesn't mean we shouldn't do anything at all. You know, this is certainly just the first iteration of this from Ubisoft's
Evan, that is
perspective.
exactly how I feel about VAR being used to re-referee decisions in the World Cup. It's not perfect, but it has improved the rate of correct decisions.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, from my perspective, I want less toxicity in multiplayer games. I want less hate speech in multiplayer games. I'm not looking to be exposed to more of that. You know, in my free time. You know, I get enough of it just on Twitter or in the real world or wherever. So every game should adopt this, you know, and certainly like there's room for each individual studio sort of calibrated differently based on their community and kind of the way the game operates. But to my mind, this should be a standard in 2018 and beyond. And frankly, these developers could do themselves a lot of good in their PR effectively and marketing to take this step. You know, games are becoming more inclusive, and this is a step in that direction toward making them positive spaces and indicating the kind of behavior that's good.
I agree. I was wondering, I was thinking, reflecting on this now, like wondering why I was having such a positive time playing Fortnite. It's because no one can talk to me. No one talks to me at all. There's no text chat. There's, I think voice chat is off by default if you're squadding up with people. It's just a blissful experience.
And yet you don't hear people complaining that Epic is censoring Fortnite things, right? I mean, they've effectively taken the nuclear option and made it impossible, right? So
yeah, you can talk to people in squads if you want, but you know that's on you if you'd like to.
It's unfortunate, you know, it is really unfortunate to me. Not to reflect on this too much, because we should remember that there is wide support and praise as Ubisoft did this from the game development community. But it is unfortunate in 2018 that anything controversial becomes a polarizing political issue, as if like there has to be another side to this at all times. Like, why can't something simply be wrong? Like, why can't racism simply be wrong to everyone?
Right.
You know, or 99% of people. It's that's the frustrating thing to me, I guess. I just spent too much time reading Twitter. So anyway.
All right. Well, thanks for walking us through that, Evan. In other news, we have. Let me ask you guys this: have either of you played the Culling or the Culling 2?
Absolutely not.
No.
Are you aware of the Culling or the Culling 2?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was sort of styled after a game show style, like battle royale survival game.
Yeah,
right?
I'm not too familiar with. I didn't play much of the first one. I definitely played a bit of it when it first came out, and it was. I think it came out with sort of the first wave, or during the first wave of like this surge of popularity in battle royale. It was an early access game on Steam, and I want to say the scope of it was smaller. I don't think it was quite 100 people. And it was a melee-focused battle royale game. So you would getting a revolver was like the end game, god mode, you know, best situation possible. And it took usually killing 5 or 6 people to even get one to begin with. It was like, I think it was a well-liked game at the time. But over the course of the following year, some of the updates I think pushed people away. They changed a lot of things that the community wasn't super big about, or just naturally PUBG and Fortnite started just pulling people away. It's really hard to say. Point is, it lost popularity and was down to a player base of, I don't know, like 25 active people a day, which was surprising. It was surprising when the developer, I want to say, Xaviant announced that they were stopping support for the Culling, and maybe a couple weeks later announced the Culling 2 was going to be coming out. And the Culling 2, when it did release into early access, did not make the best impression because it just did PUBG. It just tried to do PUBG. Chris Livingston played it, and he has some impressions on the site, and they are pretty poor overall. I mean, to do PUBG or to do Battle Royale, you really have to like stand out nowadays. And it was a militaristic parachute in, circles close in, shooter. No really real major distinguishing features. And people were angry about it. They were like irritated for whatever reason. Not a great game. Got some horrible Steam reviews. I think critics didn't like it either. It wasn't well received overall. And just this morning, the developer announced that they're aware and they're sorry. I guess they're pulling the Culling 2 from sale and refunding purchases. Good news, I guess, if you bought it. What's more interesting is that they are returning to the original Culling. As of today, I believe the original Culling is going to be available on some kind of test server, and it's going to be reverted to the day one version of that game. And cherry on top, it's going free to play, and I think that's sort of like what most new battle royale games have to do, unless they have EA or Call of Duty giving them the air beneath their wings. So it's kind of an unfortunate situation overall. But what really struck me about the message to the players and that the developer put out was that it was addressed directly to the community, and quote unquote the community, and it was very apologetic to the players, and it got me thinking, why is this like a changing dynamic between developers of live games or ongoing multiplayer games and the player base? Is the community a real thing, and is it dangerous to sort of empower the community with sort of being right the whole time and to pander to them? To me, it's sort of a dangerous tone to set, especially when updates are more frequent and mistakes are more easily made. Development is more volatile than ever. Do you guys?
I mean, but I think I was reading the piece that you shared with me earlier. That, like the average concurrents were like at 6 or something. Like at that point, what do you do but throw yourself on the mercy of the people who like the original game? Like I don't feel like they had much other choice. I think there probably is like a broader question with other games about like what's the correct way to take feedback. Like it's tricky because I definitely like sympathize. If we want to talk about the broader thing, I do sympathize with like the notion that like developers are faced with this kind of avalanche of feedback from people who don't design games for a living, and some of it can be kind of presented very aggressively and blah blah blah. But at the same time, I've also like, as someone who's played the 2 games that I play most, I've definitely seen times when feedback was clear and obvious and should have been responded to and actioned much sooner. Like the whole history of Destiny 2 is essentially like like I've spoken to some guys who went to that summit and said there was an element where Bungie admitted that they'd changed stuff almost for the sake of changing it, because they felt that as developers they kind of weren't creatively challenging themselves unless they changed stuff. But they really did fail to take into account the stuff that people liked about the first game, and got some stuff like so wrong that they're having to rebuild the game a year later. And likewise, even with Hearthstone, there was periods where like there was obvious feedback about stuff being broken or wrong that then didn't get corrected for a while. So I think like I definitely wouldn't want to kind of like back ourselves into a position where like, wow, people shouldn't be having opinions about games which they're kind of communicating, because I think like there's all sorts of examples of that having a positive effect on games. As for the Culling 2, like I struggle to imagine what almost any battle royale is going to do, like you say, unless you come out of the gate with like an idea that's so sensational that, like my one that I shared with Evan during E3, which will remain secret for now.
What?
But
That was good.
I think Evan would agree it's a game changer.
Okay, all right.
Do you want me to share it with you, James?
Yeah.
Evan, is this an appropriate forum?
I mean, I think we give up the rights to produce that game in doing so. But...
Tim, no offense, I don't think you're going to be producing this game anytime soon.
All right, this is my gift to you, James. I'll try and give you the pitch as quickly as possible.
Right.
It's the classic battle royale template. So actually, it's not the classic. Wait, is it? All right, I've confused.
Off to a great start.
You don't parachute in. This is point one. So
Okay.
the map begins, it's like, imagine a big circle or whatever, but around the corner of a map is a train doing a loop. It's like a kind of a monorail, and you choose when to jump off the train. Okay, so that's different from the start. In the center of the map is an enormous tower, like a skyscraper. Imagine it like the one from the movie Raid or Judge Dredd, right? All of you now have to move towards the tower as quickly as possible, get into the tower, and if people get there first, they can be like sniping at the people coming through the fields and stuff, and then ascend the tower to the top floor, the penthouse suite, where you ultimately, maybe if you just get there first, I haven't quite fleshed out some of these details. It's going to be called The Tower. It's releasing never, unless someone gives me about 20 million quid to hire some developers.
And they were talking about Snowpiercer meets
Yeah,
Dread or
yeah.
something.
Thank you for reminding me, Evan. Yeah, you could be fighting on Snowpiercer train before you get off. Maybe you can rack up some quick kills early that way. Maybe there's a smaller internal train. Maybe you could add like more contestants midway through the map, a bit like the show Love Island I'm watching now, where they bring in new contestants midway through. I mean, maybe development's easy, James. Maybe that's what we really should be talking about.
It's that simple.
You know what? I was wrong. The community is always correct.
But James, how do you feel about the tower? What do you think it would score on PC Gamer?
75.
Yeah,
75.
It's a good score. I'll take it.
The story with the Culling, I mean, for one thing, it gives me whiplash. It's never great to sort of see a developer, I mean, kind of doubt itself, seemingly. You know, like to pull their original game, then release a sequel to it. That's weird. Then to pull the sequel and bring back the original game as free, like
whiplash.
Yeah, certainly like this process revealed something to them, you know, in terms of what their community, as they put it, wanted. But you'd like to see people and studios kind of behave with a bit more confidence that way. But to me, this story really it shines a light on an issue that is ongoing. Frankly, since the dawn of Kickstarter type games and betas, you know, you could trace it all the way back to Minecraft if you wanted to. But that is like, who holds the power here? You know, who holds the power in modern game development? And yes, the people making the games hold a lot of that power. But increasingly, it's these communities, and you could even bring up stuff like the recent ArenaNet scandal, where ArenaNet caved to an internet mob asking for 2 of their writers to be fired because they said some rude things on Twitter. You know, you can characterize that differently if you prefer, but that's kind of what happened in my eyes. And so again, it's like who gets to make these decisions about design, about balance? You know, feedback plays a role, but how much of a role? You know, and I think every developer is kind of hopefully grappling with that and kind of how they want to perceive it. But like you're saying, James, there's a lot of this sort of referring to this community as a monolithic entity when it effectively we're talking about feedback from a variety of people, you know, different experience levels, different levels of investment, different regions, right, different languages. So referring to it collectively is often very dangerous, I think. But at the same time, those communities do manifest on Reddit, on official forums, you know, on Twitter. So I don't know. It's just an interesting story to follow for us. You know, I think the relationship between developers and player bases is more interesting than it's ever been than I've been, you know, playing games. You know, you got everything from developers like Ubisoft and Tim, you just referred to it with Destiny. You know, they're performing these like official summits. You know, Eve's been doing it for a long time, you online, where they're flying out sort of like ambassadors, effectively, you know, experienced players that they deem sort of worthy, that they've empowered to represent the community as like a Congress. That's like, if you would have told me that 10 years ago, I'd be like, what the hell? You know,
think of the expense. You know, the Division flew a bunch to Sweden, if I recall rightly, like you know, from NA. And then you also create you run the risk as well of creating splits in the community, because it's like, well, why are you listening to the, you know, the elite 1% kind of YouTube, Twitch streamer guys? My experience is just as valid, because I think you know, you raise a good point with, you know, you see these communities form on Reddit, but like that's not to say their opinion is going to be just like a single jest out one. I've seen the same conversations go oh well, you guys were all asking for primary weapons to be buffed in Destiny 1, and now in Destiny 2 you got primary weapons, and now you're unhappy about something else. It's like, well, how about that? It's not the same people asking for the same thing. You know, there's different. Your audience is comprised of people who play the games for wildly differing amounts of time, who want to get different things from it, who play different parts of the game in differing kind of amounts. Yeah, I can only imagine what it's like being on the kind of analytics side of these big games and trying to absorb all that feedback. I can't remember which developer it was. It might have been the Cultist simulator guy, I think Alexis Kennedy, but I may be getting that wrong. Talking about taking feedback on Twitter, and he was saying that it's much, much more helpful to have simply like a problem called out for you to describe why you feel it was like a problem, but not for you to suggest the solution, because your suggested solution will almost always be something that's been thought of and kind of rejected for other technical reasons or whatever. But like, what they really need is that kind of raw information of like, this didn't work for me because, but not for you to try and second guess. And here is how I would redesign the entire weapon system, right? That's not really useful to them. I mean, for one thing, like legal reasons, they can't usually, well, they can never accept like unsolicited submissions, right? You'd get into all sorts of problems. So yeah.
Yeah,
I don't know if it feels like I was suggesting more people who should just share problems with people. Maybe that's not a good
idea. I think what you're saying is just package your feedback nicely in a convenient, easily.
Yeah, definitely.
That's a good way to go about it. Don't be an armchair developer. But anyway, rest in peace, the Culling 2. I'm curious to see what kind of return the Culling gets, or if this kind of open expression of frustration and misdirection the developer put out there maybe gives them some sympathy and brings some people back. Either way, interesting, a bummer, hopefully a happy ending. On to another disaster. Over the weekend, Epic's first official Fortnite competition kicked off, and there have been competitions in the past, but this is the first one that is part of what they're describing as their first season of competition.
Yeah.
And this is the Summer Skirmish series. It's 8 weeks, $8 million, and 8 different formats, or I guess rule sets for each event. The first weekend that happened this last Saturday was invite only. So Epic invited prominent members of or streamers, some well-known competitive players that are kind of in the emerging competitive scene. It's really hard to
subreddit moderators.
Yeah. Weird community, like subreddit moderators, because why not? Clearly, the focus here for these opening ones is to just get viewers in and appeal to the entertainment aspect of competition rather than like the pure hardcore who is the best of the best. And like, that's a whole nother conversation we can have later. They're trying to get something going here. But it was a goddamn mess. It was a duos competition that was to run over the course of 10 matches max, with the winning conditions were you could get 2 duos wins, first team to 2 duos wins, or the best overall like kill or best overall performance across those 10 games. It was cut short after 4 games for a variety of reasons. One being with so much money on the line, and this is not a public server or anything like that, so it's not like these. This is like nearly 100 pretty skilled Fortnite players going at it for big money. With that much riding on their performance, the play was super conservative. Typically, what you see when you think of Fortnite is I think of streamers like or Ninja or someone just like rolling through a public match and just destroying, super aggressive. And in my experience, like playing myself, like that, it tends to be fairly aggressive overall because half the server is dead within like 5 minutes. Everyone gets spaced out and geared up. The stakes are much lower because, I don't know, you're probably just trying to better yourself that time. And during the competition, what happened is there were, by the time like the third or fourth circle arrived and maybe was enclosing in on a quarter of the map, there were still like 50 people left. And all of those people were hiding in towers or making these weird, they're called myth houses because the streamer player Myth sort of coined this one by one with a roof and quick editing to make like basically a snake a tunnel to the next circle. And so what you saw was it was incredibly boring. It was a lot of sitting there and waiting for basically until players were forced to engage because of the storm placement. And that sucked. What was worse, I think, was the server performance. And it's hard to say exactly why it went wrong, but it could be just the pure, like, Fortnite was probably not tested and built around so many players being in a tight vicinity, especially players who know how to build. And, you know, the server reading, first of all, that many people's actions at once, and the destruction or construction of all these building materials at once. And in the first match, after the first match, they just banned C4 because the servers also couldn't keep up with, you know, the explosions happening. Yeah.
That's great. Like, so on the fly, they made the call. Technically, we can't handle C4, so we're just going to ban it.
Yeah. After match
That's
one.
Crazy.
And
wow.
It's hard to say if this is like.
Had they banned any other items or kind of things before the event,
Nope.
James? Was there? Otherwise, it was just kind of as is, as you'd get on a regular server.
As is. Season 5 just came out, so everything in Season 5 was there. But yeah, C4 is like a contentious thing already, especially among like skilled players, because it can just ruin a build. It's so powerful at the moment. But so I don't think that people were mad about that. Either way, it's hard to tell like why exactly. Like, the private skirmishes still happen, and this isn't really a known issue. Like lag, at least, turtling is definitely a known issue in private skirmishes, but the severe lag, is not a known issue. It was made especially worse due to how it was casted, and it was casted not from like built-in drone cameras that can give you a good top-down view of the action. They had those in the Celebrity Pro-Am during E3. They weren't used very well because I think they were so new. But it was the only perspectives we had was the individual participating streamers' feeds. So they would just switch between different streamers' feeds as quickly as possible to try and show you some of the action. Problem is, like, because so many streamers were turtling, often all you could see was the inside of a building. And they were sitting there either farming or just waiting. Worse is, like, once the lag kicked in, there was almost no streamer they could follow because they had the audio on for each streamer, which was especially awkward. That wasn't just freaking out.
Yeah.
So super bad look overall.
Yeah, you embedded a really funny clip in your feature story about this on Monday, James, where I forget who the streamers were, but they were basically like, yeah, like I can't snipe, I can't switch items, I can't do this, and like the feed is broadcasting them saying this stuff, and like that sort of resolves, and they're like actively criticizing the event they're participating in, and saying like, oh, it's a $250,000 tournament, and the caster's just like, oh, ha ha ha, that guy's like always speaking his mind, ha ha. It's just like the most like saccharine, dishonest commentary of what's going on. Like in any other like professional broadcast, there'd just be acknowledgement of what's going on. Like, oh shoot, like
it's raining, if it's raining at a baseball game, they're going to talk about the rain, and I think to a certain extent, that kind of stuff should be expected. And like, it is hard. This is all new. I'm not angry that lag was a thing. I'm not like, in these early events, I would expect that stuff they have to work out. And they did test events, and they did test some of these things, maybe not to the extent they should have. But either way, the casters like didn't color it in a very genuine light. They definitely it felt like they were trying to sweep everything under the rug.
Yeah.
So they called it after 4 games and still awarded the money, even though like you could see streamers like teleporting back into the storm and dying, totally out of their control, unable to switch weapons, like unable to shoot, unable to do quick edits. It was a total mess, and I'm bummed they didn't just cancel it outright and say, guys, we have to call the game on account of weather, you know. Like it just it makes sense to me that that's what happened. So I think I'm more disappointed in the outcome and how it was treated after the fact. But
Yeah.
James, I guess like what I'm interested in is how much of it do you were kind of just teething problems with the fact this was, you know, Epic's first swing at it. Esports is hard, broadcasting is hard. I've been watching like Hearthstone for like 4 years now, and they still have like some tournaments have substantial issues with how they're run. Or do you think that the game has like fundamental issues with how it's structured and played that are going to make it not conducive to being a good spectator experience? Because I know like Evan and I have talked quite a bit about like my view is that the game is so popular that it will find, like life finds a way, it will find a way to become a spectatable experience just because people love playing it, they want to see the best players playing it. But do you or do you think, because we've talked about Battle Royale quite a bit being very tough to kind of pass visually?
yeah, I think it's both. I think one, it's easy to forget the scale of Epic and think about how long they've been doing like esports competitions, which I think is like never really, besides like the Pro-Am. They've done some of that stuff. So I'm willing to chalk a lot of it up to just like not knowing what they should be doing, or, you know, inexperience.
Well, that in and of itself is a mistake. You know, like
That's exactly.
what the typical behavior. So take Rainbow Six Siege, for example, another nascent esport, which, you know, has only recently started to be taken seriously, and like, you know, teams like Cloud9 are adopting after more than a year of activity. They partner with the ESL, an established esports organization, to basically run their shit for them, you know, and they give input, and they, you know, do a lot of partnering with teams and you know, managing events and stuff like that and putting up money. But like Epic's decision was, you know, I think we all remember the headline, you know, we published a story on it, obviously, of like Epic is putting $100 million
Yes.
into Fortnite esports. And somehow they really wanted to send this super strong message. But as they did that, they said, oh, and we're not selling teams. This isn't going to be the Overwatch League. It's basically going to be all under our control, and, you know, it's going to be completely our way. You know, like they wanted to sort of, in my opinion, like not quash, but like they wanted to make sure none of these kind of emerging third parties had the opportunity to sort of take control of Fortnite esports before they did, right? And as a result, I think, you know, earlier in the show we were sort of complimenting the pace at which Epic updates the game and just throwing things in there and like figuring it out on the fly and sort of building the railroad track, you know, 10 feet in front of them as they make the game, and how kind of admirable that speed is. But in this case, it led to a train wreck, you know.
Yes.
The moving too quickly and moving too confidently, and in my opinion, just putting way too much money into this. You know, if this would be like a low level, like if they had framed it differently as like, you know, I don't know, a like up and comers league, or you know, a showcase tournament as they did at E3. The Pro-Am was like obviously just sort of a novelty event. If they had just framed it differently, I think the result could have been interpreted a little bit differently. But they want to imitate these large events, and they want it to be the most expensive, you know, the most profitable, biggest purse esports event in the world. Like, slow down.
Yeah, I mean that's the big thing is like I think it was all way too soon. I was expecting season 5 to launch with an in-game client or something, like, because they have a replay editor. I think they need to wait until there's a way to follow a game on your own terms. And there's some problems, Tim, that I think are just inherent to Battle Royale. And I kind of want to ask Chat. So Chat, if you have thoughts, chip in now. Can Battle Royale ever be a serious, you know, 100 competitors, all pros esport? Like, can it ever be that as focused and competitive as CS:GO's scene or Overwatch is? And I personally think no. I think Battle Royale, and you could see this in PUBG's early and H1Z1's attempts at esports or competitions, is like it's always going to be force players to play conservatively in a boring way that is just not fun to watch. And it's because to win, you must win. You must get first place. And that incentivizes playing as safely as possible. What people watch, and I think why people play battle royale games, is for those to generate anecdotes. It's always good to win, sure, but when I remember playing Fortnite, and even like when I played some PUBG, it's always like these sticky situations I've been in that I somehow escape, or I may die, and I often do. I always just want to see something crazy happen in this big, wild, almost game show arena. And I think,
but I wonder if they'll be able to tweak the format for competitive to take account for exactly those sort of things you're saying. Because that was why I was asking about, is stuff banned? Because I know that in other games you do end up with that separation between what the competitive meta is and what the
yes,
kind of more kind of casual play is. And I wonder if there's going to be a version of the game which almost like forces people away from that style of play by having, I don't know, like a smaller map to begin with, or certain types of weapons included from the. I mean, I don't play Fortnite, so I can't predict. It goes back to not being an armchair developer, but I think the sheer popularity of the game, like I say, will mean that a way will be found. I think that it's interesting you saying to me about hearing the people complain about their own event, because that sounds like funny to me, obviously. But I think one of the actually appealing things about something like Battle Royale as an esport is you could conceivably have these people mic'd up in a way that you can't with other team sports games, and just talking about what they're doing, like because that's kind of like the fantasy of the game, like you're this lone person
yes,
out in the wild, unless you're playing duos and squads or whatever. But you know what I mean? Like the core fantasy is, you're dumped in with a bunch of other people. Like I it's interesting to me, the idea of like switching perspectives between some of these known people, or at some point in the future, the kind of the best pros as they're seen, and having them go like, suck it, dude. I just kind of no scoped you from across the map and whatever. Like, I don't know. I think like in a way that, let me use a completely inappropriate example from Hearthstone. Is like, whenever you watch Hearthstone, you just have the casters, two people, and their thoughts are locked in their head about like how they're going to navigate a particular turn or use the cards in their hand. And it was when they mic'd up the players for the Trinity series, which was the most, to my mind, the most enjoyable spectator event, even though it wasn't the biggest tournament, was because you had the players talking to each other about what they were doing, and it was like a fascinating insight. And I love the idea of getting a bit of that from Battle Royale. I think it would be almost a shame if you move to the world where it's just like other esports, and you're kind of locked out of that kind of interaction with the player.
I agree, and I think battle royale overall needs to be more focused on the people playing, in order to be interesting to watch than it is right now. And there are some, like you say, like Life Finds a Way. It sort of already has. There's some independent competitions. UMG Events has been putting on something called Friday Fortnite for about a month or two now. And how Friday Fortnite works is it foregoes attempting to even get 100 pros in the same server, or in the same room, and says, okay, we're going to get I don't know, 30 of the best players right now, and they're going to we're going to pair 4 of them in a squad, but within that squad, there's going to be 2 teams of duos. And their competition will be, instead, to like do what they do best on Twitch, is just like fight for kills. And there have been variations of this kind of tournament thing, and it's super entertaining to watch, because you can you're focusing on 4 people instead of 100, first of all, and you're seeing them do what they do best, which is just fuck up average players constantly over and over, and they do cool shit constantly over and over. It's easier to kind of follow the competition over a long period of time, because you can have multiple matches and you can do this easy tournament format. Some interesting variations have been to like allow them to sabotage each other. You can, within that framework, like play with the rule sets to make it more of like a game show. This time we're going to allow only C4 and only hunting rifles, or no building, only gray weapons, or whatever. It's and I think that's what makes battle royale most interesting, specifically Fortnite, because it's so good at having this wacky, wild toolbox to pull from. Is how can the best players improvise with the tool set they have, the tools available to them, or a restricted tool base, or tweaked rules. Instead of going for the win, what if we go for the most sniper kills, or the most explosion kills, or whatever it may be. And I think that's what's going to like make Battle Royale. That's the format that's going to make like Fortnite, competitive Fortnite, a thing. Is the more playful iterations of what's within that toolbox, because
Yeah.
otherwise it's going to be, it's like inherently going to be slow and boring to watch. And I think within that format, like you can and you do see these players like talking shit to one another, or sometimes between matches, sometimes during matches, depending on the rule set. And it's really interesting to like pick a personality that you maybe already follow and just keep following them without being disoriented or lost or cut out of a competition too quickly. And it almost gives it a more, it's closer to like a WWE like wrestling format. It's much more playful and silly, while still being this big spectacle and showpiece for their skills. So I don't know. That's kind of what I think it should trend towards. And the Summer Skirmish series is, by no means are they locked into this rule set from week one. They can, and I think Epic should move towards something that's a bit more playful and de-emphasizes getting that first place, because otherwise, people are just going to gravitate to UMG and Friday Fortnite and all these other events that are already incredibly successful, and not even headed up by Epic themselves. So
it's worth noting, other Battle Royale style games who have attempted this, H1Z1, PUBG, they've both seen the same kind of very conservative play in their biggest tournaments. Last October, I went to the IEM Oakland event for PUBG. Same situation. First 15 minutes of the game, no one fought anybody, or perhaps there'd be one or two deaths in some of the matches. Chris Livingston on our team, who attended a big H1Z1 tournament, I forget when this was last year, but yeah, it's similarly 20 minutes without a shot being fired. At some point, it's tough. It's tough, like, because if the more you bend and kind of reconfigure the rules of the game or the design of the game or the items that are available, you're changing all this stuff, the less it resembles the base game. And then the esport becomes less of like a marketing tool, because you have to, it's not self-explanatory. It's like, well, it's Fortnite, but all this shit has changed. So it's like a new version of Fortnite. Well, can I play that? Well, no. Or it's only like available in this part of the menu or something. You know what I mean? So
I think you've nailed it there, Evan. That is absolutely the risk of taking that sort of approach. So I think like any move down that line would have to coincide with it becoming its own mode within the game. Like this is the competitive version, how the kind of pros play.
It's tough. Like, yeah, at a certain point, I think we have to just acknowledge that there are intrinsic challenges with broadcasting something this massive. To me, yeah, it's a combination of rule changes, but I think it's also in the presentation. It has to happen at both ends of the spectrum. Think about I don't know how much of the Olympics you guys watch, but spoilers, like not all the Olympics is live and synchronized, in real time. A lot of it is heavily edited. They use Foley, so they use like generated sound effects in some cases to go over the broadcast, right? To make it appear, I don't know, more exciting. You'd have to ask them. But in any case, like think about my solution. If I was working at Epic, what I would suggest is don't make it live. If you're playing up this competitive, like truly competitive, if you want to treat it as a serious game, that's kind of your goal, rather than like novelty and exhibitions, which is another valid approach. If you're going in a competitive direction, you want this to be Counter-Strike, but Battle Royale, don't make it live. Just piece together a narrative with like all your wonderful replay editing tools and your commentary that shows, just like a golf broadcast or an exciting piece of the Olympics where you're showing all these successive competitions, and sort of piecing together a story of how France, the underdog, beat whoever else. France just won the World Cups. I don't know why I'm calling them an underdog, but you know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of advantages of that format, and it's a way of distinguishing themselves from other esports, because you're getting this like finely produced, like gorgeous thing. And obviously, like, there's a whole set of challenges there with like, okay, what about the people who are live in attendance? And they'll tweet out the winners. Like, any solution is going to have its own issues, but that's something I'd like to see. And frankly, it's when I talked to the folks behind PUBG at PAX last year about how they might approach esports in the future. It's something that they touched on as well as one method.
That's fascinating, and I honestly would like to see that for more games in general. Even something like Counter-Strike would be fascinating to see that kind of approach.
Speaking about players talking shit while live, I watched HCT Oakland at the weekend, which was the Hearthstone Tour stop in Oakland, which is over the river, not the river, over the water from us in San Francisco. River.
It's a bay, Tim.
It's a bay. There was a player, unknown previously player called Quanchi, who was playing, I think the Argentinian pro PNC, who's a very good player. They went this very long series, but Quanchi ended up losing a game where it turned out he had brought 4, not quite meme decks, but certainly on the wackier creative side. He's a big fan of the streamer Brian Kibber that we profiled on the website before, and he basically took 4 of Kibler's kind of most recent decks and brought them to this tournament. And he went quite deep in the tournament. I think he ended up like top 16. But during this series against PNC, Quanchi, I think it was in the second to last game, he became increasingly enervated by, he was playing this, it was this Overload Shaman kind of weird deck against Shudderwock, which is a deck that builds up this kind of like infinite combo. And he got so cross because I don't even know if he realized at the time, but he missed lethal, which is one of the kind of cardinal sins. And then he started writing these messages to chat on like his notes of paper and holding them up. He was making these crazy plays. Like he duped these, he had like 4 2/8s and he duped them using a spell. So his own board was full, so he couldn't really do anything. And he just got crosser and crosser. And the casters were kind of like, the casters were just going like absolutely like crazy to the point where he ended up like milling his final card and then being kind of furious at the card he'd milled, like even though like there was no other card it could be, it was hard in his... So he became this kind of like instant sort of like Twitch chat legend at the same time as like sort of being idiot's too strong, but people both like, some were kind of like he's the hero because he's like as if Twitch chat had got to a tournament and just behaved badly, but also like was sort of obnoxious. And I think like Frodan the caster like went pretty hard on him, going like this guy's a clown basically, and then had to like walk it back a bit and found him at the tournament, took a photo with him and set him on a Twitter account. It was like, it reminded me, just because James, you were talking about car crash, it was like the biggest like Hearthstone car crash I can remember in quite a while, and also reminded me that that's exactly what I watch tournaments for, that sort of moment.
Oh man. Well, you know, the summer summer skirmish series is so there's 7 weeks left. I don't know if they've announced that this weekend is going to have one or not yet. Maybe they want to take an extra week out to work out some kinks. I would hope so. But I'll be covering that fervently as the weeks go on. Also next week, Ninja is hosting it's called the From Something Till Dawn.
Is it the Red Bull one?
Yeah, it's like an all-night, basically nonstop tournament where at the end of the night, as soon as it's from dusk till dawn. Jesus, why did I not? As soon as the sun goes down, they start, and as soon as it comes up, they stop. And whoever has the most wins or kills or something at that point will be the winner. So I'll be covering that, maybe not watching the whole thing, but.
Oh, James, I just wanted to quickly call out as well. While he, along with Dr. Lupo, Guardian Con at the weekend, and then I think maybe it was on to Monday, but they ended up raising 2.7 million for St. Jude's, which was an incredible. Stephen on our team interviewed the creator of Guardian Con, a guy called Ben Broman, Professor Broman, and it really is like unbelievable the work that goes into that event and the amount of money they raise. We also did a profile on some of the guys from the Destiny Community Podcast who ended up having to tattoo their butts with matching heart symbols because of a particularly large donation that came in right at the end of their stream. So I think that was a great event. Like Warframe was there as well. Epic with Fortnite, and obviously Bungie with Destiny and Gambit mode.
It's definitely one like SGDQ and like all these community sort of born events, one to pay attention to, and it's usually a lot of fun. It was, I think Dr. Lupo's the best Fortnite streamer in my, that I know, and watching him during his stream was just like super heartwarming, extremely entertaining, and he's a family guy, so or at least like a fairly sane white dude who doesn't seem toxic, at least that
I remember like watching him because he came up through Destiny 1. That was like that was his path, like along with a bunch of those other streamers migrated from that game to Fortnite.
It seems like
good stuff.
Yeah, nice work from them. Real quick, let's do like one or two questions before we wrap up here. If we can Twitch chat, I'll get to yours. So just tag PC Gamer in chat if you have any questions for us about computer video games, and I'll attempt to get to them. But we do answer questions from our PC Gamer Club Discord first. If you want to know more about the PC Gamer Club, go to club.pcgamer.com, and you can find out more about our monthly subscription service. It's like $5 a month, and you get some really good stuff. You get an ad-free experience on the site, digital subscription to the magazine, invite to our Discord, which is growing and changing all the time. Free game each month, first access to like beta keys and stuff we get. We're always trying to change it, make it better. So and it's a really nice way to directly support us if you like what we do. So we appreciate that. Let's answer this first question here. It's kind of tailing off what we've been talking about today. Paralyzed Horse, good name, asks, what's the next big multiplayer game type or genre? In the past, we've seen sort of first-person shooters, MOBAs, character-based, team-based multiplayer games, battle royale. What do you guys, card games, what do you sort of predict coming through the emergence of new technologies and design ideas? And is there anything that you think, using your tried and tested video game brains, been in the industry long enough, what do you predict?
Well, we were talking about this morning in a different way. It is almost definitely going to come from a mod, because you think about Dota 2, you think about Battle Royale and Arma, you think about the survival genre and Arma, again, all this stuff emerges in kind of the creativity and tinkering, seemingly, of the modding community. And then it's sort of made mainstream, it's made bigger, it's given a proper budget, proper art and all that stuff, and refined through all these various games that we're seeing. So it's probably a good place to look.
I look forward to the new video game genre, Nude Elf mod, very shortly. It's going to be great.
James, it's going to be the tower. I thought we established this about half
the tower. Okay, yeah. All right.
My quick answer will be not on PC yet, but I think whatever Rockstar do with Red Dead Cowboy multiplayer will be big.
Cowboy multiplayer.
We've all seen like what GTA Online's done. The thought of something similar but with cowboy is fairly compelling.
All right. I think there's still something. We had one of our questions. I forget which of our discussion questions on this site. Somebody brought this up in the comments. But PlanetSide 2, I think there's really something there still. From a technical perspective, I think in terms of experience, PlanetSide 2 kind of ahead of its time, and certainly had its own issues with creating a meaningful conflict in a sense of a beginning and end. But I feel like there's something there still, in a game like Battlefield and Call of Duty, as we see them explore Battle Royale in their own way. I feel like a persistent, ongoing multiplayer shooter war with maybe another tactical or strategy layer on top of it, as we've seen CCP explore. I forget the name of that game. I feel like there's something there still that would be an appealing extension of what we're seeing with Battle Royale. I mean, what appeals to people with Battle Royale, right? It's the sense of scale, the sense of a narrative, and the sense of guaranteed drama and conflict, right? So those are the things that seemingly have helped people latch onto this. So we're probably gonna have one or two of those ingredients.
I remember writing about PlanetSide 2 before it came out and thinking it had just premises of any game, thinking it was just gonna eat the world, and then kind of Halo came out instead, and I played that. But I think Evan's right. Ahead of it was a good way of describing it. That idea of massed sci-fi battles, that feels where that kind of shared world shooter genre could go.
I think I'm with you. I think we've yet to explore scale and large multiplayer. It's easy to forget how young Battle Royale is at this point, and I think this is still tip of the iceberg for what the hell you can do with 100 people in a space, or 1,000 people. I mean, what Maverick's Proving Grounds is upping to 500, 400, something like that. So I don't know. It's just going to enable the scale of something like that is going to enable so many different design ideas and behaviors, and I'm kind of curious, see what comes out of it.
I mean, have any of the battle royale games splitting the two teams into two teams of 50 and just having one team wear blue and one team wear red and have them go at it?
Yeah, like
Fortnite.
all of them have done that. Yeah,
Fortnite like basically made it permanent. And it's one of my favorite modes, honestly.
Next thing you'll be telling me the tower's already been done. I've got no other ideas, guys.
Oh my gosh. Here's one that'll make you lose some sleep tonight. Maniac86 asks, if you guys at PCG were not involved in the gaming industry, what would you likely be doing or want to do?
Sleeping underneath a highway overpass.
Rucksack.
No, I don't know. I mean, I'm doing what I want. So that's good news. I don't know about Tim. I can't speak for him.
What I'd likely be doing and what to do, I suspect, very different things. Probably my favorite other job other than in games was working in a bar. So maybe I'll be working in a bar again. But I did also have a brief sojourn at like Playboy TV. So perhaps I'll be mild in the adult entertainment industry.
All right.
I mean, there's still time, James. I can be one of those creepy dudes you're such a fan of.
Jesus Christ.
I mean, maybe I already am.
I got into thinking and writing about games because I like thinking and writing about things. So I would probably be an academic and chase some kind of high degree that ultimately returns nothing to me, puts me in debt, and at an existential crisis, maybe at 34 instead of earlier or later.
Solid game plan.
So hard to say. Maybe just teaching in Idaho again. That's gonna do it for us today. And don't forget. So guys, I've been practicing different sign-offs. I got some feedback last week, and Game On isn't really hitting as hard as I liked. So I'm gonna try one today. Let me know if it works. If not, we'll workshop it. This is James Davenport with the PC Gamer Show. And never forget the power of play.
Wow.
Thanks for joining us, everyone.
Inspiring.
Wow.
Wow. Thank you,
everyone.
James.